Russell Singleton is joining us. Russell Singleton joining us in studio at News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. This is Top Story with Bill Colley. Why is Russ here? Well, because it's time again for better health with Tripp Family Medicine, which is located, of course, right here in Twin Falls on Fillmore Street across from the main post office. First of all, we were just having a conversation. Since it's not April Fool's Day, the chairs were safe to sit in when you walked in this week.
Thankfully.
Yeah, the doctor last week, he sat in a chair and there was an air horn underneath it. Not of my doing, I should point out. But
Absolutely.
It was the wake-up call for everybody here that morning. We are talking today about some weight loss issues. And I see the statistics, and obviously, and I'm probably part of that very much as well. I need to drop about 80 pounds, but I'm not unusual any longer in America because this obesity epidemic over the last 35 years has really taken off. And for people working in the medical professions, it's a huge concern.
Oh, absolutely. Speaking of statistics, we're looking at probably 150, 160 million Americans are overweight or obese. If we divide that population even further to talk about adult men, we're looking at probably 75% of all adult men are overweight or obese. So absolutely, this is a very common concern for a lot of people.
And I think a lot of it too is my father's generation. They were up and working. They were moving around. They were often outside. But now we are basically office people. And we sit in a lot of chairs most of the day, and that has a huge impact on our body shape because of that. If we don't get out after work, for instance, and this huge, the treadmill business has to be huge right now. But I understand that unless we get a handle on this, it's not going to get any better. But you have been working on this, a lot of study, a lot of research over the years, and you have some thoughts and ideas as well as some things that actually work very, very well to maybe help people beat this.
Absolutely. I think the point you brought up about our work life is huge. I think it has a lot to do with it. We are so successful as a society that we simply don't have to work the way we did a generation ago. You add to that our food supply is much different than it is now. We have high caloric foods with relatively little nutritional value that's easily available, and it's available in abundant quantities too. But at Tripp Family Medicine, we have developed ways to turn back the clock a little bit and to look at some of these issues, to look at a person individually and try and dissect the issue. Why is it that they've been struggling with weight? What are we actually trying to achieve? And how can we get them there? And I'm really excited to talk about that because there is no paucity of bad information out there.
I went to see an endocrinologist probably a year ago, and I was telling her, I said, look, I'm back on the bicycle and I'm doing all of these things and I'm out walking every day, but I'm not losing a lot of weight. And she looked at me and she said, you have to understand the second key to this is going to be your diet. She said, you are going to have to eat less whether you want to or not. She said, you can do all the exercise you want, but she said, it still comes down to your caloric intake.
That's a really fun thing to talk about. I am a big proponent of what we call calories in, calories out. Now that particular phrase has been maligned in the media lately. It's been deemed oversimplistic, not practical, but I'm with you, Bill. That's the science. That's the only way to lose weight. You've got to expend more calories than you take in. What's interesting though is how we communicate that to people. I mean, think of an individual who may struggle financially. What might you tell them? Well, the key to financial success is you've got to make more and spend less, right? That's good advice.
Sure.
But what does it really mean? Practically, it's worthless because how do you do that? How do you make more and spend less? So when it comes to weight loss, how do you eat less and move more? That's good advice. That's the right advice, but leaving it there really doesn't do anyone any good.
We need to point out Russell Singleton is in studio with us. Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine this morning. You're listening to News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Top Story as well with Bill Colley. And, of course, Russell's title is Physician Assistant. There's no S on either one of those words.
That's correct.
Right. So it's the job description. It's It's not necessarily a possessive word, so we have to make that clear. But we've got more coming up on this. You're going to go into some detail just about what you do, I guess, on a regular basis when someone comes to the office and says, "I know I have to lose weight." And I think part of this, we've got about a minute before the first break. Part of this is, though, every patient has to have the desire first, right?
Oh, that is incredibly important. To use another example, I think it's a lot like folks who want to quit smoking. Everyone knows they should. Some people have tried, some have failed, some aren't really ready yet. It comes down to, do you really want this? Are you ready to do this?
And I remember, who was it, Rush Limbaugh, talking about how he lost weight some years ago, and he said it was the same thing. He was questioned, I think, in an interview on NBC's Meet the Press, and he said it had nothing to do with discipline. It was all about desire,
Yeah,
ultimately.
I think there's a huge psychological component that we don't give enough credit to.
We've got more coming up on this topic in just a few minutes. Also, on the other side of the break, if you have a question, too, or comment about weight loss, and perhaps you're interested in getting involved with the program, feel free to give us a telephone call at 736-0300. Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine this morning. On Top Story, more of that ahead. 38 right now at our studios. It's 8:40. Our guest in the studio, Russell Singleton, he's a physician assistant with Tripp Family Medicine here in Twin Falls. And I should point out, again, located across from the main post office. If you're on Fillmore Street, you can't miss it, because I was driving by your office on Saturday, Russell, and there's a great big sign in the window. So people who are in the neighborhood are obviously going to see that.
Absolutely.
Know exactly where you're located. If people are actually looking to for some details, they can actually go to the web too, right? The web and even Facebook to check out Tripp Family Medicine.
Absolutely. TrippFamilyMedicine.com is our web address, and we are on Facebook. We even have a hashtag, I believe. I think it's hashtag Dr. Tripp. But please reach out to us any way you can. We love to connect with our patients, and really helping people live happier, fuller lives is what we're all about. Life's too short not to feel good, is what we say around the office.
And for people who would actually like to maybe call directly, I know we had a couple of callers a few weeks ago who did not yet have a doctor in the area. Some people have moved to the area. They're looking for an office because it's a long drive to go home sometimes to see the old doctor or to visit the old office. And so if they're looking just to call and maybe set up an appointment or get on the list, how do they do that?
Well, our phone number is 933-4400, and either Dr. Tripp or myself would be more than happy to meet with you, talk about where you're coming from, where you're at, what your goals are. We practice full scope family medicine, Dr. Tripp and I. So weight loss is actually one of those things that we address. And to kind of segue into to our topic for the day, I think that's where weight loss should be addressed anyways, is in primary care. I think when you look at the spectrum of weight loss professionals, you've got folks on one end who might have very little training, a weekend course, they're teaching a fitness class or something like that. And then on the other end, you have these really hyper-specialized practitioners. And on either end of the spectrum, I think you're missing out on a lot of what makes weight loss difficult. And so having your family doctor, your primary care provider, consider all of these things is the only way to be successful in the long run. And that's why at Tripp Family Medicine, we've developed this program, and we've seen a lot of success.
We have a caller with us, and caller, I want to thank you for being patient. Russell Singleton is on the air with us this morning with Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine right here on Top Story. And you're up next on News Radio 1310 KLIX. What's on your mind?
Good morning. My personal experience with weight gain and weight loss is that it seems to be a cyclical thing associated with the season when our society seems to eat more, like the holiday seasons. And, it's almost encouraged that you eat, more of a volume and more rich food. And then what I experience is that it might be a natural thing as far as evolution, where I seem to be heavier during the cold months than I am during the warm months. I guess the energy or the calorie intake, that I manage to stop it before I get too heavy, and I kind of start limiting myself on eating. And though I may be 20 pounds heavier in the cold months, I seem to manage to get it down, to where I not as heavy in the warm months. So I don't know if that's a common thing or wouldn't be excessive weight, I guess, but it's weight gain and weight loss.
I think that's actually very common, and you've highlighted one of the things that Bill and I were talking about earlier, that it really does come down to diet and exercise. And as the seasons change, we are naturally a little less active as it gets cold, and we eat a little bit more around that holiday season. But you bring up another point too that I think is really important to touch on, and that is that a lot of folks do go through kind of a cyclical change, if not just throughout the seasons, but throughout their life. They'll lose 10, 20 pounds, they'll gain it back plus a little bit. They'll fall off the wagon, they'll get back on, lose 10, 20 pounds, gain it back. I was actually reading a study this morning that talked about how this cycle of repeated weight loss and weight gain actually makes it harder and harder for you to lose weight and keep it off. There are physiologic changes within the body that make sustainable weight loss much more difficult as you've been through that cycle over and over again.
I want to thank you for the call. I had a friend, in fact, from church, and his wife, he joked with me one time, she was on a diet. He said she's lost hundreds of pounds throughout her life. In other words, she had that cyclical, she'd lose, she'd gain, she'd lose. But actually, when she got into her mid-70s, she lost the weight and kept it off. But I again, that gets back to desire, but that also is the combination, I think, with discipline. At that point, you'd have to be very, very disciplined.
Well, you're absolutely right. One of the big differences between our program and maybe a fad diet that you hear about on the news or read about in the paper is that we're all about sustainable changes. We're about lifestyle changes. You can do anything for 6 weeks. You can manipulate your diet, your physical activity, you can lose a little bit of weight, but unless you can live with those changes and you can be happy and you can live a full life, that weight is going to come back. And so together we remove barriers and we work on new habits that will allow you to eat what you want to eat, do what you want to do, and keep the weight off, not for the next 6 weeks or 6 months, but for the next 60 years, long term. This is a marathon that we're training for, not a sprint.
When you were talking earlier about this total program, you do need that support network, because if you have a family that's willing to support you through all of this. The last time I was really serious about trying to lose some weight, my fiance at the time, she said to me, "Oh, great." She says, "That means I have to diet with you." And I tried to say, no, that's not the case. But she said, look, if we go out to dinner and things like that, she said, all of our choices are going to be based on what you're doing. And so she basically was saying she would have to join me, which she didn't want to do. Is there some that does come up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, in the office, diet's a dirty word. It's a 4-letter word, we say, and that's because we don't want to look at it as a set of restrictions. It's not what you can't eat. It's about making better choices. And when you look at it that way, when you have a shift in attitude, you begin to enjoy life again. And it's not about what you can't have, it's about what you can have. Not about what you shouldn't be doing, but what you should be doing. But I think you bring up another good point, Bill. Going back to that example of smoking cessation, if you have a couple or a family that smoke, and one of them tries to quit, man, that is an uphill battle, and they are going to struggle. It doesn't mean that it can't be done. It just means that without that support, they're going to have to work a lot harder. And weight loss is the same way.
We have Russell Singleton in the studio with us this morning. He is a physician assistant at Tripp Family Medicine here in Twin Falls on Fillmore Street. Call it 851-38 at our studios. This is also Top Story with Bill Colley on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. If you have a lot of people joining workout clubs, but again, a lot of people, it's like New Year's resolutions, they don't last. Should someone come see you first before they even consider making going out and buying a membership, doing something like that?
Wow, that is a good question. I think that's probably going to come down to personal preference, because you talked a lot about motivation. So whatever motivates you, I think, is what you should do first. Whatever gets you in the mindset that this is going to be a long-term lifestyle change, that's what you should do first. But I get a lot of folks who come to me with a story that goes something like, I've done everything, I've tried everything, I don't know what else to do. What else can I do? So I do spend a lot of time having to kind of unravel this lifetime of success and failure to figure out why the last time they joined a gym, they weren't able to lose weight. One of the first things we do is we look at a person's medical history or their metabolic health. We're drawing blood. We're looking for things like pre-diabetes, insulin resistance. We're looking for thyroid disorders, anemia. But then we're looking at their medical history too. And this goes back to the idea of why your primary care provider, why we at Tripp Family Medicine are best positioned for this. A lot of the medications that people come in on are behind their weight gain. It doesn't mean that they're not serving their function and controlling hypertension or diabetes or what have you, but there are other options. There are better options. And as primary care providers, we're able to manage those things with appropriate medications. We're able to manage those things with medications that are weight loss minded. So again, a comprehensive approach.
I know that I was explained to a couple of doctors explained this to me in the last couple of years. Things such as a sleep apnea will have an impact. Things such as a low testosterone level will have an impact. Certain vitamin deficiencies may have an impact. And so you just mentioned the totality of all of this. If you can sort of put all that together and start remedying those factors, it'll be a big assist.
We talk a lot about obstructive sleep apnea. That is a huge contributing cause. If you want to talk about hormone levels, suppressed growth hormone, increased levels of cortisol. We also tend to use, at certain times, medications. Now, that's not the basis of our program, but a comprehensive program, of course, includes some mention of medications. We use them to get people started. We use them to get over a plateau. We use it to manage a comorbid condition like diabetes or hypertension. But if we don't have an in-depth conversation about a person's individual health, we don't discover things like sleep apnea. And I've actually brought that up with several patients, and it has made all the difference in the world.
We want to point out, if you have a comment or question too as well, and you may be in this category of someone who is desperately looking for a way to drop some pounds, 736-0300. Russell Singleton in the studio with us from Tripp Family Medicine. And this is Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine on News Radio 1310 KLIX. We've got a few minutes left. I was going to say, when you talk about some of these issues with people, do you get resistance ever? Because I think a lot of people out there have gotten so frustrated over the years, they just don't feel there's any other answer. Chris Christie, for instance, got himself some surgery done in order to lose the weight.
Absolutely. Talking about weight is a very difficult thing to do, if not because many physicians and PAs just don't really know how to bring it up, but sometimes the provider may struggle with weight themselves, and so they don't feel prepared or adequate to have that conversation. But when you have a relationship with your provider, when you have the type of relationship that we try and establish with the whole family at Tripp Family Medicine, those conversations flow much easier because we know one another. We know the history. We know the family. We know the factors that may be coming into play, and we can talk about that. We have an open line of communication, but it's not easy. It is certainly not easy.
I've been told to give up, for instance, white foods, breads, rice, potatoes, all of those things. And that was another recommendation I had. The problem is I love all of those things. And that's a challenge too.
Well, I think that's kind of one of those half-truths, focusing on what you can't have versus what you can have. Now, there is some science behind avoiding those refined grains and refined carbohydrates. And our plan involves a very, very detailed nutritional assessment and nutritional intervention. And yeah, we talk about carbohydrates, but in summary, carbs aren't the enemy. There really is no such thing, in my opinion, as bad food. There are some things that we should certainly limit and eat in moderation, but to blame it on just one food or one food group, I think, is disingenuous, because you talked earlier about diet and exercise. weight loss is like being in a rowboat. You've got two oars. One is diet, one is exercise. You've got to work them both. Otherwise, you're going to end up going in circles.
For people, again, who'd like to get in touch with the office, how do they go about doing that?
Give us a call, 933-4400. Visit us on the web, trippfamilymedicine.com, or come check us out on Facebook as well.
I was going to say, I got a chance to look at the Facebook page the other day, and what a great method it is now with the internet. I know the internet's a double-edged sword too, but in the way that it's been a godsend, really, I think in many cases, for people who can go there and they can check out information and the like, and even ask you a question via the messaging function, right?
Absolutely. Please log on, check this out. Let us know how you're doing, what questions you have. We would love to help you in any way we can.
Well, Russell Singleton, I want to thank you much. We'll be talking again soon. Tripp Family Medicine, of course, located on Fillmore Street in Twin Falls, directly across the street from the main post office. As I said earlier, you can't miss it. There's a huge sign in the window. That'll be there the next time you drive by. News is coming up in just a moment. We have a guest coming by from the Twin Falls City Council. It's coming up on 8:59, 39 right now at our studios. Fox News, too, straight ahead.